Hey everyone, if you've ever felt that burning sting of being underestimated by family, by society, by the world that handed you a raw deal from birth, the sharp prick of doubt piercing your skin, like icy needles that twist deeper into your heart with every sidelong glance or whispered judgment, leaving you breathless with a mix of shame and fury that churns in your gut like a storm, then this story is for you. All about clawing your way out of the dirt with fingernails scraping against rough earth. Each scratch a desperate plea for escape from the suffocating weight of expectations that crush your spirit. Proving the naysayers wrong with the thunderous echo of your achievements resounding in their ears, like a defiant roar that shakes the foundations of their complacency. And tasting that sweet, sweet justice like honey dripping from a comb warmed by the sun. A nectar that washes away years of bitterness with an overwhelming rush of vindication that makes your chest swell with long-suppressed pride. And if it hits home, smash that like button right now to show the algorithm we want more tales of triumph over betrayal. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another epic revenge drop. Because trust me, stories like this fuel the fire in your soul with a crackling warmth that spreads through your veins like wildfire, igniting a spark of hope where despair once reigned. So let's dive in. Picture this. The air in the cramped, dimly lit kitchen of my childhood home hung heavy with the scent of stale coffee grounds, mingling with the greasy residue of unwashed dishes piled in the sink. A perpetual fog that seemed to cling to everything like a curse, thick and oppressive, making each breath feel labored and tainted with the hopelessness that permeated our lives. It was the mid-1990s, and I was just a young child. Huddled under the rickety wooden table that wobbled with every frustrated slam of my father's fist, the impact sending vibrations through the splintered legs and into my small body, curled up beneath. A tremor that mirrored the fear quaking in my tiny chest as I fought back tears of confusion and hurt. His voice, rough from years of factory shifts and unfulfilled dreams, boomed through the room like thunder cracking over a barren field. The deep rumble vibrating the thin glass windows that rattled in their frames. Life's a grind, kid. You think you're special? We're all just cogs in the machine, born to struggle. Die trying. Each word landing like a hammer blow to my fragile self-esteem, making me feel small and insignificant, a worthless speck in a vast, an uncaring world that seemed designed to break spirits like mine. My mother, her eyes hollow from double shifts at the diner, nodded silently, her calloused hands wringing a dish towel as if squeezing out the last drops of hope, the fabric twisting with a soft, rasping sound under her rough palms, her silence a dagger to my heart, a betrayal that left me aching with loneliness, even in her presence that night. As I lay on my threadbare mattress in the corner of our one-bedroom apartment, the coarse fabrics scratching against my skin like sandpaper, the walls thin enough to hear the neighbors' arguments bleeding through like muffled shouts echoing in a tunnel. A fire ignited in my chest. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was a quiet, simmering certainty laced with a profound sadness for the life I was trapped in. I was different. I could feel it in the way my heart raced when I dreamed of skyscrapers piercing the sky like gleaming steel blades and success that shimmered like distant city lights. A yearning so intense it brought hot tears to my eyes, while everyone around me settled for survival amid the musty odor of damp walls and the faint metallic temps of rust from leaking pipes. Their resignation, a heavy shroud that threatened to smother my budding aspirations. Little did I know, this was the spark of a revenge that would span decades. A payback against the invisible chains of poverty that had shackled my bloodline for centuries. Chains that felt cold and unyielding against the warmth of ambition, dragging me down into a pit of despair where self-doubt whispered relentlessly in my ear. To understand the depth of this revenge, you need to feel the weight of the inheritance I was born into. The heavy burden pressing down like a leaden blanket that suffocated any flicker of joy. My great-grandfather, Elias, emigrated from a war-torn village in Eastern Europe in the early 1900s. Arriving at Ellis Island with nothing but a tattered suitcase that smelled of salt and mildew, and dreams of the American promise that tasted like fresh bread on his parched lips, yet quickly turned to ashes as reality crushed his optimism. The salt of the ocean still crusted on his clothes. Rough and gritty against his weathered skin, he toiled in sweatshops, his back bending under the weight of sewing machines that hummed like relentless tormentors. The air thick with the acrid stench of machine oil and sweat-soaked fabric, each stitch a reminder of his shattered illusions and the growing void of regret that hollowed him from within. He married a woman equally battered by fate, and they scraped by, raising children in tenements where rats scurried like omens of perpetual lack, their tiny claws scratching across wooden floors in the dead of night, a sound that invaded dreams and amplified the terror of instability. Elias would sit by the flickering kerosene lamp, its warm orange glow casting long shadows that danced on the peeling wallpaper like ghosts of lost opportunities, his voice a low rumble vibrating through the smoky air, telling stories of what could have been. A farm back home with the earthy smell of fertile soil and the sweet scent of blooming crops. A life of abundance that now felt like a cruel taunt, but always ending with a sigh that carried the weight of defeat. "This is our lot, son. Don't fight it." Words that seeped into his descendants like poison, breeding a cycle of emotional numbness and quiet desperation. That resignation passed down like a poisoned heirloom to my grandfather, who fought in World War II only to return to a factory job that ground his spirit into dust. The metallic clang of machinery echoing in his ears long after shifts ended, a constant reminder of the trauma he buried deep, manifesting as sleepless nights filled with nightmares that left him trembling and isolated. He married my grandmother, a resilient soul who mended clothes for pennies, her fingers pricked bloody by needles that symbolized their endless struggle, the sharp sting of each puncture followed by the coppery taste of blood as she sucked on her wounds, her resilience masking a profound grief for the life she could have had. Their home was a symphony of creaking floors underfoot and empty cupboards that groaned when opened, where dinner was often watered-down soup with a thin, bland broth that left a hollow ache in the belly, an emptiness that mirrored the void in their hearts where hope had withered away, and dreams were luxuries they couldn't afford, as elusive as the faint aroma of roasting meat from wealthier neighbors that teased their senses and deepened their sense of inadequacy. By the time my father came along, the pattern was etched deep. Work hard with sweat dripping into eyes stinging from exhaustion. Stay poor with a constant gnaw of hunger in the gut that twisted like a knife of perpetual want. Pass the torch of disappointment like a flickering flame that singed the fingers and scorched the soul. Dad dropped out of high school to support the family after Grandpa's injury, landing in the same factory that had claimed his father's vitality, the air heavy with the sharp odor of molten metal and the deafening roar of presses that drowned out his inner cries of frustration. He met Mom at a local dance hall, where the music temporarily drowned out the despair with lively rhythms pounding through the wooden floorboards. A fleeting joy that ignited a spark of love amid the gloom, but reality crashed back with my birth, the sharp cries piercing the sterile hospital air thick with antiseptic. I was the unplanned addition to a life already stretched thin like frayed elastic. My arrival, a source of quiet resentment that festered unspoken, deepening the emotional rifts in our family. From my earliest memories, the house echoed with arguments over bills, voices rising like steam from a boiling kettle, raw with accusation and pain. The electric company threatening shutoff with letters crinkling in tense hands. The landlord pounding on the door for rent with knuckles rapping like gunfire that made my heart leap in terror. My father's face, lined with premature wrinkles that felt rough to the touch, would twist in frustration as he snapped at me. "Boy, don't get ideas above your station. We're not the Rockefellers." His words landed like punches, each one reinforcing the narrative with a thud against my chest that left emotional bruises. We were born losers, destined to bow to circumstance with heads lowered under the weight of invisible crowns of thorns that pricked at our pride. Inside, though, my mind rebelled, a whirlwind of defiance and sorrow. Lying awake at night, the distant wail of sirens piercing the darkness like sharp blades through silk, I'd whisper to myself, why me? Why this life? It felt like a cosmic injustice, a betrayal by fate itself that left a sour knot in my throat and a crushing heaviness in my soul. The emotional pain was visceral, a knot in my stomach that tightened with every no we couldn't afford. twisting like a rope under strain until I thought I might snap. Every Christmas was secondhand toys that carried the faint, musty smell of previous owners, evoking a pang of envy and isolation as I imagined other children's unbridled joy. Every time I saw classmates in new clothes, crisp and fresh while mine were patched and faded, rough against my skin and carrying the faint odor of mothballs, amplifying my sense of otherness and the stinging ache of not belonging. As I grew into my teens, the antagonists in my story multiplied. School was a battlefield where teachers, seeing my worn backpack frayed at the seams and free lunch status marked by the greasy cafeteria trays, pegged me as troubled potential, their assumptions a barrier that deepened my isolation and fueled a growing resentment. Mr. Harlan, my history teacher, stern man with a perpetual scowl etched into his leathery face and glasses perched on his nose like judgment, pulled me aside one day after class. The classroom smelled of chalk dust tickling my nostrils and old books with their papery, aged aroma, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like accusatory whispers humming in my ears. "Son," he said, his voice dripping with condescension like slow molasses that coated my pride in sticky humiliation. "Kids like you, from families like yours. You don't go to college, you end up in jobs like your dad's. Be realistic." His words burned, fueling a rage that simmered beneath my calm exterior, like coals glowing red-hot. A fury mixed with a deep-seated hurt that made me question my worth. My body tensed, fists clenching at my sides, with knuckles whitening. Heart pounding as if it might burst through my chest with a rhythmic thump echoing in my temples. Internally I screamed, "You don't know me? You don't see the fire inside that scorches my thoughts and drives me forward despite the pain," but outwardly, I nodded, swallowing the bitterness like bile rising in my throat with a acidic burn that left me choking on unsaid words. Family gatherings were worse. Holidays where uncles and aunts, themselves trapped in the cycle, would pat me on the back with pitying smiles, their hands heavy and clammy against my shoulder. A touch that felt like chains binding me to their fate, Uncle Ray. A burly man with a beer gut straining against his shirt and a laugh like gravel crunching under boots, would boom, kid, learn a trade. Dreams are for fools. Look at me. I dreamed big once. Now I'm fixing cars for peanuts. Their laughter rang hollow. A chorus of defeat that made my skin crawl with goosebumps rising like prickly warnings and a wave of nausea from the betrayal. My cousin Lisa, the successful one who married into a slightly better situation, would whisper, "Don't end up like your parents." Okay, but honestly, it's in the blood. Her breath warm and minty against my ear. Her words a venom that seeped into my veins, poisoning my confidence and leaving me reeling with a mix of anger and profound sadness for the lack of faith from those who should have believed in me most. Betrayal cut deep, like a knife slicing through flesh, drawing emotional blood that stained my memories. These were my kin, supposed to uplift with encouraging words that could have been a lifeline, but instead, they reinforced the cage with bars that felt cold and unyielding, trapping me in a prison of doubt where every attempt to escape was met with more walls of discouragement. The powerlessness gnawed at me like teeth on bone, a relentless torment that eroded my resolve bit by bit. Nights spent staring at the cracked ceiling where paint peeled like dry skin, tears stinging my eyes with a salty burn that blurred my vision, thinking, is this all there is? Am I doomed to repeat this with the same echoing despair that haunted my ancestors? It was emotional torture, a slow erosion of self-worth, making me crave validation like air, gasping for it in shallow breaths that left me lightheaded and desperate. But here's where the tension escalates, where the injustice piles on like weights on my shoulders, pressing down with crushing force that threatened to break me entirely. At 16, I got my first job flipping burgers at a greasy fast food joint. The air thick with fryer oil that coated my skin in a slick sheen, and desperation that hung like a pall. A stench that clung to my clothes and reminded me of my lowly status every time I caught a whiff. My boss, Mr. Grady, a red-faced tyrant with a mustache that twitched when he yelled, treated us like disposable parts. "You're nothing without this job, kid," he'd sneer, docking pay for minor infractions, his breath reeking of cheap whiskey sharp and stinging in my nostrils. Each insult a fresh wound to my already battered ego. One shift, after working 12 hours straight, feet throbbing with a dull ache like hammers pounding nails, back aching with a persistent burn that radiated through my body. I asked for a raise, my voice trembling with a mix of hope and fear. He laughed, a guttural mocking bark that echoed off the tiled walls slick with condensation, and said, "Raise? For what? You're from that trash family down the block? Go beg on the streets if you want more." Humiliation flooded me, cheeks burning hot as if slapped, vision blurring with unshed tears salty on my lashes. A wave of shame so intense it made my knees weak and my stomach roil. Internally, "I'll show you one day." You'll regret those words that echoed in my mind like a taunting refrain. Fueling a vengeful fire that burned away the tears, that moment crystallized the antagonist. Not just people, but the system, the cycle. The doubt that had haunted my lineage with whispers like wind through cracked windows. Insidious and chilling, it was infuriating. Their behavior wasn't just mean, it was a deliberate diminishment. A theft of my potential that left a hollow void in my chest where confidence should have bloomed. Aching with the pain of untapped possibilities, school didn't help. Bullies like Jake, the quarterback with a smug grin, flashing white teeth and designer sneakers squeaking on the linoleum floors, would corner me in the lockers, the metallic clang of doors slamming like punctuation to his taunts. "Hey, Popper, heard your dad's factory is laying off. Gonna join the welfare line?" His friend's laughter was a knife twist, sharp and piercing through my heart, my pulse racing with blood roaring in my ears, sweat beading on my forehead cool and clammy, as I bit back retorts that burned on my tongue like acid, the restraint costing me pieces of my dignity. Powerlessness peaked when I confided in a guidance counselor about college dreams. Opening my vulnerable heart in a moment of rare trust, she, with her perfectly coiffed hair stiffed with spray and sympathetic smile that didn't reach her eyes cold as glass, sighed, "Honey, with your grades and background. Community college at best. Don't set yourself up for disappointment." Her words hung in the air like stale perfume, a dismissal that shattered my fragile optimism and left me reeling with a deep, aching disappointment in myself and the world. Disrespect piled on, each instance building sympathy in you, the listener. Because who hasn't felt that sting like a wasp's barb embedding deep and releasing venom that spreads through your being? The craving for justice grew, a hunger that kept me up, planning in the dark with the tick of a clock like a heartbeat marking the passage of my unresolved pain. The turning point came at 18. Fresh out of high school, when Dad's factory closed, the news hit like a freight train rumbling through my bones, shattering the fragile stability we clung to. He came home, shoulders slumped under an invisible load, face ashen, pale as paper, the smell of machine oil still clinging to him, sharp and industrial. "That's it, son. Dreams die here," his voice breaking with a vulnerability that pierced my heart. Mom wept quietly in the kitchen, the faucet dripping like tears plinking into the sink, her sobs a soundtrack to our shared grief that enveloped me in a suffocating embrace. But in that moment, as I watched them break with sobs catching in their throats, something snapped inside me like a brittle twig underfoot. A cathartic release of pent-up emotion, my chest heaved, breath coming in short gasps, ragged and hot. A resolve, hardening like steel in a forge glowing with heat. No more. This ends with me. It was my breaking point. The emotional pain transforming into determination like alchemy turning lead to gold. A phoenix, rising from the ashes of despair, I vowed revenge, not violent, but victorious with the sweet scent of success that promised to heal my wounds. Against poverty, against doubters, against the bloodline's curse that tasted like ashes in my mouth, I'd build wealth, rewrite the story, make them all eat their words like bitter fruit that would turn sweet in my victory. Planning began in secret. I devoured books from the library. Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, with pages soft from turning, each chapter a balm to my wounded soul. Biographies of Henry Ford, who rose from farm boy poverty, his hands calloused from tinkering with engines in barns lit by lantern light flickering yellow. The smell of hay and oil mingling, Ford's story mirrored mine. Buried in hardship like soil compacted under boots, he transformed it into the Model T empire, his resolve unyielding despite mockery that rang like gears in a crowd, inspiring a surge of empathy and motivation that mended my fractured belief in myself. I'd sit in the library's quiet corner, the musty scent of pages filling my nostrils like aged wine, internal monologue racing like thoughts tumbling over rapids. If he could, so can I. Poverty is preparation, not punishment. A mantra that slowly rebuilt my shattered confidence. I studied Edison, who endured 10,000 failures, each one a stinging rebuke like slaps to the face that left emotional welts. Yet he declared light into existence, his workshop filled with the acrid smell of burned filaments and ozone, his perseverance a beacon that illuminated my path through the darkness of self-doubt. Carnegie, rising from Scottish immigrant rags, speaking commands that built steel empires, his voice echoing in boardrooms where lesser men quaked, the air thick with cigar smoke, his ambition a mirror to my own buried desires. I crafted my definite chief aim on a crumpled notebook page. Hidden under my mattress that sagged under my weight, I will build a tech empire worth millions, breaking my family's chain of struggle. And prove every doubter wrong, repeated daily aloud in the mirror. Voice steady despite the knot in my throat tight as a noose. Each recitation, a ritual that fortified my spirit against the onslaught of negativity. Discipline became my weapon, rising at 5 a.m. The world still dark and silent, except for the distant hum of traffic. To study coding online, fingers flying over a borrowed laptop, keys clacking like rain on tin, eyes burning from the screen's glow blue and harsh. The fatigue a small price for the empowerment that grew with every line of code. I worked odd jobs, saving every penny, the clink of coins in my jar a symphony of impending payback ringing metallic. Each deposit a defiant act against the poverty that had starved my soul. Execution was ruthless. At 20, I launched my first app. A simple, budgeting tool born from my family's financial woes that pinched like tight shoes and left blisters on my psyche. Rejections came fast. Investors laughed, echoing Mr. Grady's scorn with guffaws that boomed in polished offices. Their offices sleek with marble floors, cold underfoot that I once mopped with soapy water sloshing. Kid from the slums? No track record. Get real. Each dismissal a fresh stab of rejection that reopened old wounds, tension built. Heart pounding in meetings with a drumbeat in my chest that echoed my anxiety. Sweat trickling down my back, cool and sticky. Internal fears whispering like ghosts in the wind. They're right, give up. A seductive lure that tested my fragile resolve, but I persisted. Refining with late nights under desk lamps buzzing. The solitude, a companion to my deepening determination. Networking in coffee shops, reeking of espresso bitter and rich, where I'd overhear success stories that fueled me like caffeine buzzing in my veins. Rekindling the hope that had nearly flickered out, success trickled in. The app gained users with notifications pinging like chimes of validation. Revenue climbed like vines reaching for sun. A slow but exhilarating ascent that mended my tattered self-worth. By 25, I'd bootstrapped a company. Hiring my first employee in a tiny office with peeling paint, flaking like dry leaves and the faint smell of mold. Antagonists resurfaced. Dad scoffed. Pipe dream, son. Come work with me at the warehouse, his voice gravelly over the phone line crackling. A dismissal that stung with familial betrayal. Uncle Ray mocked at Thanksgiving. Turkey grease on his chin glistening. Tech, that's for rich kids. His words a barb that hooked into my lingering insecurities. Frustration boiled like water hissing on a stove. Short, tense dialogues. You'll see, I'd say. Voice calm but eyes blazing with inner fire and unspoken hurt. Escalation hit when a former bullied Jake, now a mid-level manager, applied for a job at my growing firm. The interview room smelled of fresh coffee, steaming and aromatic. His smug grin faltering as recognition dawned like a slow sunrise. You running this? He stammered with a voice cracking. The shift in power, a thrilling reversal that soothed years of torment. I smiled inwardly. Payback time tasting like victory's nectar. but I hired him, on probation, to watch him squirm under my command. A subtle revenge that tasted like victory, sharp and satisfying, laced with a complex mix of pity and triumph. Historical digressions deepened my resolve. I'd reflect on the Rothschilds, their family unity forging banking dynasties from humble beginnings, each generation repeating principles like a mantra chanted in hushed tones. Their legacy a reminder of the power of perseverance against emotional odds. Or Lincoln, surrounding himself with rivals to sharpen his mind, his log cabin origins fueling national leadership with the scent of wood smoke and earth. His humility, a lesson in transforming pain into purpose. These stories weren't side notes, they were fuel, expanding my narrative with layers of inspiration, thick as fog that lifted my spirits from the depths. By 30, the company exploded, an AI-driven finance platform revolutionizing budgeting for the underserved. Ironic revenge on my roots like a twist of lemon in water. A sharp temp that highlighted my ascent, millions rolled in with the rustle of checks. But the real payoff brewed like strong tea, a culmination of emotional healing. I bought out Mr. Grady's failing chain, his face paling in the boardroom white as sheet, the air thick with his defeat, heavy and stale. "You... how?" he gasped with breath short. My response: "Preparation through poverty, sir. You taught me that." With words crisp as autumn leaves, delivering a closure that mended the scars he had inflicted. Family confrontations peaked at a reunion. The backyard barbecue smelled of grilled meat sizzling and smoky. Laughter turning to silence as I arrived in a luxury car with leather seats soft and cool. Dad's eyes widened like saucers. Mom's tears flowed salty down her cheeks. "How?" they asked with voices trembling with a mix of awe and regret. I revealed the empire, the wealth, the redemption. Uncle Ray choked on his beer, fizzing and bitter. Lisa's envy palpable like heat from a fire that warmed my vindicated heart. Internal triumph surged, relief washing over me like cool rain after drought pattering on skin. A catharsis that released decades of pent-up emotion in a flood of joy. Sub-stories wove in, a mentor I met, an old entrepreneur who saw my fire, sharing tales of his own revenge against corporate giants with voice raspy from years, his wisdom a guiding light that healed my isolation, or a failed partnership where betrayal mirrored family doubt, teaching resilience like scar tissue toughening over wounds. Each added depth, pacing with short tension bursts. The deal collapsed, my heart sinking like a stone in water with a plop of despair, followed by long dramas, but in that dark office, alone with the hum of the AC cool and steady, I rebuilt brick by brick, with hands steady. Each step a victory over the emotional abyss, sensory overload painted scenes. The crunch of gravel under tires as I drove to my first investor pitch, nerves electric like live wires, buzzing with anxiety. The metallic taste of blood from biting my lip during rejections, coppery and sharp, mingling with the salt of tears, the warm glow of success as checks cleared. Confetti-like fluttering in the air with a lightness that lifted my soul. The ultimate climax unfolded in that hospital room. Post a stress-induced collapse from overwork, waking to families' pitying faces with the beeps of machines piercing the sterile air thick with disinfectant. A moment of vulnerability that stripped away pretenses. I revealed, while you doubted, I built a $99 million empire. Dad, your factory? I bought it, turned it profitable. Uncle Ray. That car shop, mine now, with raises for all. Shock rippled like waves through water, Dad's jaw dropping. Eyes misty with unshed tears of pride and remorse. Mom sobbing joyfully with hiccups that spoke of relieved love. Ray sputtering, red-faced humiliation flushing hot. Jake fired earlier for incompetence, begged via text with phone vibrating in my pocket. A final twist that sealed my emotional liberation. Triumph flooded me, chest expanding with deep breaths that filled the void once occupied by pain. A roar of validation escaping raw in my throat. Justice served, not destruction. But elevation like rising dough, warm and expansive, they regretted everything. Forced to acknowledge my command over destiny with nods heavy with newfound respect, A reconciliation that mended fractured bonds? Looking back, this wasn't just about money, it was karma's elegant dance, proving that struggle refines us for greatness, like fire tempering steel in a blaze of transformation. Lessons, faith, and discipline turn pain into power with a transformative heat that forges unbreakable strength. Revenge is sweetest when it uplifts like a gentle breeze, carrying away the remnants of hurt. If you're in the trenches, no, you're chosen. Rewrite your story. And watch the world bow with a graceful sweep that honors your journey. Phew, what a ride. If this tale of breaking chains and claiming destiny gave you that rush of inspiration tingling through your limbs like electric currents of possibility, or maybe even a plan for your own payback sparking like flint on steel, igniting your inner fire, hit that like button hard, drop a comment with your most satisfying revenge story, and subscribe for more emotionally charged Reddit revenges.